So I've come inside out of that horrible weather that we're having today. Just a typical wintry day in Northern Ireland, really. The video I posted last week was test footage from a recent trip I took with my wife and my daughter up to the north coast of Northern Ireland. I took my Fujifilm X-H2S with me, and the main purpose of that video was to test out F-Log2. So I wanted to make this video as a sort of follow-up to last week's video, giving you some initial thoughts that I've had on that F-Log2 footage that I shot. The shots in last week's video were taken with a variety of lenses. They were either 50 frames a second or 100 frames a second, and each one of them was H.265 420 F-Log2. So all the footage shot in last week's video was F-Log2, meaning that the lowest ISO that I could put my camera at was 1250. I don't use any ND filters on my lenses or my camera, so I was just having to hike up the shutter speed to compensate for the high ISO. In a minute, we'll jump into Premiere Pro and have a quick look at how the footage holds up. If you couldn't be bothered watching the rest of the video, I'll summarize my thoughts in a couple of quick points. With a base ISO of 1250, in certain situations, the footage can come back looking pretty noisy, but if you're able to clean that up or you don't mind a bit of digital noise in your footage, then it shouldn't be an issue. I'm not sure how well H.264 holds up on this camera, but H.265 and ProRes definitely, the footage is incredible. And with F-Log2 giving you that extra dynamic range, there's just so much information to do whatever you want with it. I think it's about time we jumped into Premiere, had a quick look at how I approach editing F-Log2. The way I'm going to colour this footage is how I would colour any footage. The only difference is the conversion and creative LUTs that I might use. Quick disclaimer, I am in no way a grading expert. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I think the majority of people don't really know what they're doing, and you just try your best to make it look good. As you'll see, I rely quite heavily on the RGB parades, but I mainly just use these scopes to find my white point, find my black point, and then I kind of do the contrast, white balance and saturation by eye. After I balance each clip, then I'll maybe throw on a creative LUT to give the video an overall look, and then maybe add some film grain, and Bob's your uncle. Bob's your uncle, where does that phrase come from? That's ridiculous. That's the plan for today's video, so enough preamble, let's jump into Premiere and I'll show you how I go about editing F-Log2 footage. Okay. The first thing you can notice when you bring F-Log2 in is how flat the image is and how desaturated all the colors are. But you shouldn't worry because the information's all there. So we go to the first clip here. You can see the sunrise. The sun is just hitting the top of these rocks. Everything else in the shot is in the shade, in the nice morning blue light. So I've got my clips on the timeline, and I've created an adjustment layer. That's usually the first thing that I do. On that adjustment layer, I've added a lumetri color effect and selected my conversion LUT, which is this LUT Company F-Log2 Creative 8 Soft Version 1 LUT. Something to note about this LUT, and it's one of the reasons why I like it so much, is that if you bring the exposure all the way down, you can see that the blacks never get to true black, to zero here. Is that called a knee or a shoulder or something? This conversion LUT keeps the sky and anything that might be blown out around 85, and that's kind of where I like to keep my highlights anyway. So I've got my adjustment layer on top with my conversion LUT. So if I click on the clip itself, first thing I want to do is, it's really cold blue light. I'm going to warm it up ever so slightly. And I'm going to raise the highlights. I usually want to keep this line here around 80, and we'll not worry about the sky just yet. So bring the highlights up until some of those highlights are hitting the 80 mark. That looks about right to me. And then there's a lot of mids in here, on the rocks, that they've been brought up with the highlights, so I want to bring them back down with the shadows. So I'm just going to bring my whites down until there's a little bit of detail in them, and then I'll draw your attention to our black line. So you can see, similarly to the whites, this LUT caps our blacks at around 5% or 4%, something in there. I don't even know if this is a percentage, but that's kind of how I read it. So someone let me know if I'm talking absolute nonsense. I can see by this line here that the blacks are being crushed, so I'm just going to grab my black slider and bring that up until it looks level, somewhere about there, and that's going to bring a little bit more detail back into the blacks. I'll have a look in the full screen. That looks good to me, white balance looks good. Then I'll just kind of do saturation by eye. What I like to do with the saturation is bring it all the way up and then sort of pull it back to see how far I want to go with it. So around 110, let's say that, I'll plug that in. And there you go, that looks good to me. So go to the next clip. This is a chapel, quite a famous chapel in Ballintoy Harbour. You can see Rathlin Island in the distance here. Let's drag the adjustment layer across and see what it does to this shot. There you go. All that is the conversion LUT on top of that shot, and already it looks great. This wee line here is this house, and these wee nuggets here, that's the sunlight that's reflecting off this white wall of the Ballintoy Chapel. What I'm going to do first is play with my highlights, kind of get them where I want them, push them up a little bit. With them, pushing the highlights up will bring the whites up, so I'm just going to pull the whites back down to about 80 and grab the shadows, and that pulls our mid-tones down with the blacks. And then look at the black line here. We've crushed a few blacks, so bring the blacks back up, and that looks good. Maybe warm it up ever so slightly. Saturation, same thing. Go too far and then pull it back. That's what I like to do. 115. Let's go with that. That looks good to me. On to the next clip. This is a nice little 100 frames a second shot of a wave crashing over a rock. So let's drag the adjustment layer with the conversion LUT over the top and see what it does. I'm just going to scroll to the brightest point of the shot and then adjust our whites first. So click on the clip and go over to bring the whites down here. And then I want to grab the shadows, bring them down. Again, that's pulling some of the blacks down with it, so I'm just going to readjust the black point just so they're not completely crushed. And then you can see the water here. I sort of think this water should be, it's looking a little bit too blue. You can see that up here as well, so just pull the white balance over, heat it up a little bit. It's a nice bit of color coming in here, the reflection of the sky. And then just do the saturation by eye. What's that? 130. Let's bring it down to 120 and see what that looks like. Yeah, it's looking good to me. This next clip is Ruth keeping an eye on our daughter, making sure she doesn't run into the sea. I'm going to pull over the adjustment layer with the conversion LUT very quickly, and it's adding a good bit of contrast in, but this area here looks quite blown out, so let's have a look. Warm it up a bit on Ruth's face, and then I'm going to pull the shadows down to where I want them. Pull the whites down to about 80, somewhere there, shadows. And then look at the blacks here, a little bit of clipping, so pull that back up. Have a look. Maybe want my highlights up just on Ruth's face ever so slightly here. Highlights up a little bit. Whites back down. Shadows. Yeah, that's looking good. Okay, the next clip. This is Mussenden Temple in the distance. And a wave coming in on these rocks. So let's drag our conversion LUT over the top. It's looking very blue. All of these rocks in the foreground are crushed, so we've got to deal with that. Pull those blacks back a bit. And I think for this, to give the sky a bit of punch, I'm going to bring the shadows right the way down to about there. That's maybe a bit too far, but just the shadows ever so slightly. Warm up the image up here in the white balance. A little bit of saturation. Just do it by eye. Go too far, come back. Let's go 130 and see what it looks like. It's looking a little bit pink, so I'm gonna just tint it green ever so slightly. Just by one. Maybe warm it up. And there you go, that's looking good. Okay, on to the next clip. Here we go. I actually love this shot. This is a wave, just like slow motion wave. I'm just like panning with the wave. Same thing, grab the adjustment layer with the conversion LUT over the top, and that looks good. It's maybe a little bit overexposed in the water, so I'll just bring the white point down ever so slightly and pull the shadows, and that'll bring some mids with them. And then I've crushed the blacks there with the shadows, so just lift those blacks up ever so slightly, and that's looking good. And then warm it up, just because it's a sunset shot. So, and then look at the saturation with our eye. It's looking good. 115, looks good to me. So what I'm going to do is go into the effects of this clip and just paste it onto the next clip and see what it looks like. Okay, it's not looking good, but it should be quite an easy fix. So it's too much shadows. Pull back on the shadows in this one. Raise our white point up a little bit. Cool it off. Take off the tint. Yeah, that looks good to me. So here we go. This is the final shot. It was taken out the window of the house that we actually stayed in on the north coast. Sun setting over, this is a golf course down here, and you can see the windmills on the hill. So drag the adjustment layer with the conversion LUT over it and see what it looks like. Bring the shadows up a little bit and our white point down. Let's play with the white balance and see. I think it's looking good. A little bit of green just to counteract the magenta in the sky. Yeah, that's looking good. What I might do in a project like this is add a creative LUT on top of all the footage, just to kind of tie each shot together and give it like an overall sort of creative look. I'm gonna go in here and add a free LUT called Aspen. My two Lumetri colors on my adjustment layer. The first one is the conversion LUT, and then the second creative LUT is Aspen, and I have it at 20%. But I'm just gonna open up the creative tab here and change 20% to 100, just for an example. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of adding LUTs to their footage and keeping the strength far too high in those LUTs. You can see how ridiculous this LUT looks at 100%, like it's far too heavy. Like look at Ruth there, that shot, like it's ridiculous. But if we go back in and change the intensity from 100% down to say 10%, and that to me just gives that extra bit of like secret sauce to the footage. Aspen works as a bit of a teal and orange look. In this shot here, you can see if I turn it off and on again, that's it off, and that's it on. If you look at the green in Ruth's hat here, that's it with it off. You look at those green tones. With Aspen on, it kind of changes the greens, shifts them more into the blue. And her skin, it takes the pinkiness out of her skin and shifts it more into the orange. But as I say, I like it at 20%, but I think even for this, I might have it at 10. The final step to how I edit my footage without going into titles and all that sort of stuff is that I might add a bit of a film grain overlay. So if I have one here that I like to use. It's a 4K fine grain overlay from Grainzilla that I bought, and I think it gives my footage a lot of character. So if I drag that in and drop it down under the timeline, I don't really know which blend mode to use for film grain, but I kind of just wing it like everything else. So I generally have it at overlay or soft light, hard light sometimes, linear light sometimes seems to look good. So for this example, I'll just stick it on overlay and show you. So we've got our fine film grain over the top of the footage. The blend mode is set to overlay and opacity is 25%. So let's have a quick look and see what that looks like. So there you go, there you have it. I guess the process is quite simple really. I bring my footage in, conform it to 25 frames a second, lay it on the timeline, and then bang a conversion LUT over the top as my starting point. The conversion LUTs I've been using as a starting point for my editing of F-Log and F-Log2 footage came from LUT Company. So once the conversion LUT is over the top of the footage, I'll go through and make a few adjustments, like find my black point, find my white point, play with the highlights and shadows, play with the saturation. Once I've done all the basic corrections, then I'll maybe chuck a creative LUT over the top of the whole project, add a bit of film grain, and there you go. So I guess a big question is F-Log2, will I be using it for all my projects in the future? I don't really want to commit to an answer because I haven't really fully tested it. The only shots I've taken with it really are the ones you see in this video, and they're of waves crashing against rocks and cliffs and my wife walking towards me on a beach. My initial thoughts though are that I might just stick to F-Log1 for now. I love that the camera has F-Log2, but F-Log2's base ISO of 1250 just kind of scares me a little bit. Maybe I just need to get comfortable letting my footage be a little bit noisier. Some people might think, why would you choose F-Log1 when you have the option of F-Log2? I just think F-Log has been out for a long time. There's maybe a few more conversion LUTs for F-Log footage than there are F-Log2. Slightly less dynamic range kind of suits the way I like to edit my footage anyway. I like it contrasty, I like dark shadows, I like bright highlights. So having slightly less dynamic range in F-Log really doesn't seem like an issue for me. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Maybe you learned something from watching this video, or maybe all you learned was that I actually don't have much of a clue of what I'm doing. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed today's video, if you'd like to see more videos like this, and wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye. Bob's your uncle. Oh.